like to, introduce our wonderful speaker for the night. So as you are seeing on the screen, our speaker is Nandhini Rangan. She is a Google Cloud Learning Technologies and Solutions lead. She is on a lofty mission of bringing cloud skills to the world. Her career has spanned multiple jobs and industries. So she began her career as a software engineer, got her MBA, and worked as a management consultant and worked in strategy and operation roles, to name a few. Learning has been a pivotal part of her life, and it has helped her grow throughout her life, in her career and in her personal life. She is very excited to present on how to navigate your careers with cloud, and she's going to share with us a few resources which are available to build skills to thrive in a cloud first environment. And with that, I think this is pretty much the end of the presentation on my end. And Nandhini, I would like to hand off the stage to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Sonakshi. Hi, everybody. Like Sonakshi said, I'm super excited to be here this morning. I'm Nandhini. I actually live in Toronto, Canada. And I think I put in the chat, my favorite drink of choice is coffee. So you'll see me drinking like 4 to 5 coffees a day. So I don't know if it's actually a favorite drink or if it's just something that I need, but I can't be without my coffee. So with that, I am going to start presenting, and awesome. So I think everyone should be able to see. You'll see Google Cloud Learning, yeah?
Yes, Nandhini. But we are seeing the browser with the tab.
Yeah, perfect. Okay. Awesome. And then I will full screen. Okay, so now you see full screen, yeah?
Yes, Nandhini. We are seeing full screen.
Great. Thank you, Sonakshi. Okay, so huge thank you first off to Women Who Code for having me. Honestly, like talking about learning is something that I can do all day. And so the opportunity to talk to you all about learning and specifically how to develop and build cloud skills and how Google Cloud can support is something that I'm very excited to talk to you about today. Sonakshi briefly spoke about me, but quick introduction. So before I dive in, so like Sonakshi said, I work at Google Cloud, and just want to take a step back and really like paint a picture of where my career has been and what I've been doing. So I started off as a software engineer, and this was like, I don't even know what I was doing, but I was working, I think, on like mainframe and Java and all sorts of like stuff. Don't really remember, but lots of like green and black screens is what I remember when I think about like where I started my career. And then I pivoted to the business side because I was really interested in like the bigger picture and like understanding like, why we do some of what we do. And so I got an MBA and worked in management consulting and did a bunch of roles in strategy and ops. And then I almost accidentally landed in this world of learning, and I have not felt more aligned with where I want to be career-wise, and I can see myself spend the rest of my life doing what I do. And it's interesting because when I actually think back, right, learning has always been a constant theme. So every time I made a career pivot, personally, professionally, right, there's always been this theme of learning for me personally. It's a huge value for myself. And anytime I look at an opportunity, I usually pick the one where I'll have an opportunity to learn, right? So I always pick the choice where I can learn. And so therefore, no surprise that I'm super excited to be here to talk to you about learning and the opportunities that learning can unlock. And so with that, the agenda for today is going to be threefold. So I'll just kick off with some stuff around demand for cloud computing and why like cloud is becoming this huge hot topic and where it's coming from. So what are some market trends we are seeing in this space, why cloud skills are becoming so important. And next we look at Google Cloud learning resources specifically, right? So I want to expose you all to a little bit of how Google Cloud thinks about learning and some of the resources we create, how we do that, and what resources you have available. And then lastly, we'll talk about getting started on the learning journey, right? And this topic specifically, I want to also unpack a little bit on the mindset also. So there's the tactical resources, but there's also some things that can hold us back from taking that step. And so we'll also spend a little time talking about some strategies or techniques on how to unlock that mindset and how to actually get started on learning a new skill, right? Which can feel pretty hard sometimes when you're starting or pivoting or shifting, right? So we'll spend a little time talking about that as well. Overall, like I'm going to try to make this as interactive as possible. It is a webinar, so we're going to do polls. This chat function is awesome. So Feel free to chat comments. I can see it in front of my screen, so I'll try to respond to it as I'm talking. But any questions, comments, feel free to use the chat function too. Yeah. Awesome. So with that, we will kick off with our first poll, right? So the first topic is just cloud computing and where is this demand coming from, right? So our very first poll, and give me 1 second while I kick that off. All right, so I'm going to launch polling. And okay, Gracia, can you help me here? I think I launched polling. Are you all seeing polls?
Let me see.
Okay. And if not, I can just like go through the slides. That's fine. Ah,
yes,
perfect.
It's launched. Yes.
Awesome. Thank you. So can you all see a poll? Yeah. And if you can, we'd love to see what your answers to the questions on the poll are. All right, we have about 12 votes. We'll do 30 more seconds and start looking at the responses. So if you haven't voted yet, please go ahead and vote. Okay. All right, so I think we can, 10 more seconds and I'll end the poll. All right, so the first question on the poll, right? So Gracie, I'm going to go ahead and end the poll. Cool, okay. So the first question on the poll, right, which is what % of employees? So the reason why this is such a hot topic, right, is basically because cloud computing as a skill and as a trend, right? So we've been hearing for a few years that organizations and enterprises are shifting to the cloud and they're transforming to the cloud. And that is actually very true. And so when you actually look at employers and employers talking about cloud computing as a key area of investment, the right answer there is actually 60%, right? So 60% of employers globally list cloud computing as a key area of investment for their organization. That's pretty significant, right? So more than half of the people surveyed as a part of this survey list cloud computing as a huge area. Gracia, do you mind ending the polling? I see it's still on. Ah, perfect. Awesome, thank you. And then the second question that I was asking there is, in the world of IT certification, sorry, this question is a bit of a mouthful, but in the world of IT certifications, right, if you actually take a look at the top 3 certifications that get paid the most, all 3 of them are actually related to cloud, right? So all the top 3, all 3 of them are cloud certifications, which is very fascinating. And if you look at the trend over the years, it's been shifting again towards this like cloud first, cloud ready model. And so all 3 are cloud certifications. And if you look at the next question, which is how many of them are related to Google Cloud specifically, sorry, that was kind of hidden there. 2 of them. So out of the top 3, the top 2 are actually Google Cloud certifications. So all of this to say that all of these trends and demand for cloud skills, it's just getting started and it's not going to go away. Some other like stats just to introduce why this topic is important and why all of you are probably attending the session, right, is globally, IT decision makers see a gap between current skills and what they need in order to make their cloud transformation visions a reality. The number of job postings looking for cloud skills also over the past few years has increased. And I think there's a 40% increase in job postings looking for cloud skills in the past 2 years. And I just mentioned that stat around employers looking to invest in cloud computing, right? So there's a lot of market demand and trends that point towards cloud computing. And if you look at what's happening around you, you'll probably see that's the case too, right? So just like some introduction on why we are here and why we talk about this topic, and specifically for my job, why this is extremely important, right, with what we do at Google Cloud. So while Google Cloud is a technology and product, skills is something that my team and I and everyone around me thinks about constantly, because in order to be successful with the tech, you also need to be successful with the skills and learning to be able to use it. So we think about this topic very deeply all the time. And so with that, I'll pivot towards, let me pause there. Are there any questions or comments before I move on to the next topic, which is really to give you some perspective on how to think about learning itself? Any questions before I move on?
Nandhini, there is one question in the Q&A. Can you see it?
Let me, I see it. Okay.
Yes, it says answered. I don't know why, but if you can see it.
Okay. Thanks, Charlotte, for that question. So what kind of subjects would you classify as cloud? That's a great question. So I think that cloud is actually very broad. And so I think when you look at cloud, like the umbrella, it can range from like cloud infrastructure, cloud networking, security, application development, data, right? So it's a very, very broad topic. And so what kind of subjects? I think the top 3 are related to, there's actually like infrastructure up there in the top. So cloud architect is, I think, number 2. The cloud data engineer is actually number 1, right? So it's a mix of like data and architecture as well as some infrastructure type topics. So it's pretty broad, but those would be some of the subjects that come up in these certifications. Thanks, Charlotte. Awesome. So then moving on, right, we'll talk a little bit about learning itself, right? So I love trivia. So if you want to meet me on a Thursday or Friday, I'll be doing trivia somewhere. But I have another poll. So I won't do a poll, but we'll just like maybe chat this in if you don't mind. So curious, right? So when you think about learning, why do you learn, right? So what are some of the motivations behind y'all as far as learning goes? So just feel free to chat it into the chat. Like, why do you actually learn, right? And why do you invest the time to learn? To grow, because you just love learning, yep. Shift careers, self-development, yep.
In Nandhini, there's one more question in the Q&A, which is open. The question is, which cloud topics are good to begin with for beginners?
Great question. I will actually talk about that towards the end of the section when I'm going to share some resources on how to get started. So I will definitely share that at the end, but great question. Thank you.
Sounds good.
Right, gaining new skills, broadening skill sets, understanding new things, technology is advancing, so you don't want to be left behind, getting your first job, staying relevant, keeping up, right? So many different motivations. Just in the small group, you can see how the motivation ranges from wanting to get a job, learning a new skill, keeping up with what's happening, to just, I love learning, right? So huge range of motivations to why people learn. And then I want you to think about, how do you learn, right? So these are the motivations behind why you learn, but how do you actually learn and what learning do you enjoy, right? So when you think about how you learn, is it by listening to somebody talk like I am doing right now, right? Or how do you actually enjoy learning? So curious to see what you'll think there. Yep, hands-on, try and see, absolutely. By doing, yeah, especially when you're talking about technical skills, by doing. Presentation and hands-on, absolutely. Doing and self-study, interesting, yeah. Labs and documentation, reading, yeah, people love learning by reading as well. Mentorship, super important. Self-study and hands-on, awesome. So kind of pairing these two together, right? What we are seeing is starting through online resources and applying them, right? So there's a bunch of motivations towards why people learn. And then there's also all of this range in how you learn, right? So it's not like one size fits all. I actually love reading. I read a lot, and it's very strange, but I don't like watching videos. I actually prefer reading. So every time I'm on YouTube or whatever, I actually turn the transcript and I prefer reading the transcript to actually watching the video, right? So that's my learning style, but everyone has different learning styles, right? On what works for them. Hands-on, obviously with technical topics, hands-on is super important. So this kind of bringing this together, right? At Google Cloud, right, specifically, and not just cloud, this applies to every, I think, technical training provider, but specifically at Google Cloud, we really want to think about the mix, right, is why do you learn? But I'm also a transcript person. Yeah, I love transcripts. but you want to think about why you learn, but also how you learn. And we try to really bring that together, right? And so what that basically means is when we think about learning and creating learning content, we offer like all the variety, right? So there is practical hands-on application. So almost like every content you interact with, and it's starting to increase, I think, to everybody right now, but every content that you interact with has like this hands-on component where you're able to actually like do the real work in the cloud console. So it's not even a simulated environment, but it gives you access to like real cloud resources, and you're able to, for example, like spin up a VM and do some like compute stuff, right? Whatever, but you're able to do it in the real environment. There's also a lot of like gamification and challenges. So I'll leave you with a resource about a gamified challenge that's going to come up in June that you can participate in to learn skills. We also do a lot of like videos and quizzes as well, right? For the hybrid learning experience. And then of course there's instructor-led training. So all of this to say, when you think about learning and your style, just also know that almost every organization is also trying to think about how to do that. And so that should, like, if when you think about getting started to learn, don't let that be something that blocks you, right? Look around and you'll 100% find something that meets you where you are, right? Communities and documentation and whatever you need. I also like to make presentations out of my notes. Exactly, right? Like, so there's all of these different things, right? And so, and learning is also changing to accommodate all of these different styles of learning, right? So don't lose hope. We are listening to what you're saying, and that's exactly what we do at Google Cloud. And then in addition, I wanted to just add here, right? A lot of this content is also like expert curated because technology is changing rapidly. And so we do try to work with product and engineering and all of the teams that are closest to the tech as we're building out some of the content too, right? So as the tech changes, we want to keep learning updated and in line with the tech that's changing as well. And then another key part of what we are observing and what came out in these chats too, right, is there's a great thing around learning and you're doing this work, but also like being able to validate and share what you've learned, right? And so that's where we introduce and we continue to introduce and experiment with credentials. So credential is a recognition of your capability to do something and validate that. So as far as credentials go, there's two categories that I want to talk about. So one is badges, right? So skill badges specifically. And so what skill badges do is it is a hands-on environment where you can actually demonstrate a competency with cloud technology. So an example of a skill badge that I recently did was like creating and managing cloud resources, right? So where in the process of earning that skill badge, I'm learning how to create cloud resources, how do you manage these resources, right? How do you think about choosing which resource where, etc. So you're learning that hands-on, and you're also able to demonstrate that you know how to do that in a challenge scenario, right? So a challenge, unguided scenario, you're able to demonstrate that you can do it. So you'll be given a problem and then you basically do the hands-on work. We have some pretty neat like technology that is able to track the work that you've been doing and then give you a score and validate that, okay, you know what, you can create and manage cloud resources, or you can perform like foundational machine learning tasks, right? So a lot of like very small, concrete, bite-sized skill badges to learn like these cloud skills quickly and also without like too much pressure of how you actually would get started. I hope that makes sense, but I'll give you an example of one specific one as we go along, right? And then in addition, yeah, so a step-by-step process with some fun in there, absolutely. And then in addition, right, so for folks who are, as you progress, right, and you have the skills, you have the learning, you might even be doing the actual job, we have certifications that help measure the proficiency of you being able to do that job. So if you're a cloud architect, we have a cloud architect certification. If you're a network engineer, you have a networking certification, right? So there's certifications that can basically validate and show that you're proficient in that job role as well, right? So we have a bunch of credentials because it's important to learn, but also a lot of the reason why people are motivated to learn, especially with cloud, is to grow their career, is to get that job, is to show that they have the skills to their employer, right? And so how do we make it easy for you to show those skills quickly? So that's what we're going to be. So we kind of focus on the learning, but we also focus on how do you validate that you've learned something. I will spend a few minutes just going into badges because I love these badges. I was also like responsible for launching these badges, so I feel even more passionate about it. But we did this survey. So Gallup, actually, a third party, did a survey of all of these skill badge earners in the past 2 years. So everybody who had done one of these badges and earned a badge, right? And so they asked them, why are you earning a skill badge? So no surprises. It's the same things that y'all chatted about, right? It's to learn something new about Google Cloud, to grow existing knowledge and keep up, to enhance resumes in spirit of finding a job, or in preparation of a Google Cloud certification. So again, various motivations, but seems fairly obvious based on what we spoke about now. And then we also asked them, hey, on doing a skill badge, how did that make you feel, right? Like what was your outcome, right, out of doing that, right? So we know why you did it, but what was the outcome? And so just wanted to like highlight 3 specific data points here, right? So 83% of the earners, they felt more confident in their cloud skills on completing the skill badge. They also felt more confident about their professional future, right, on completing the skill badge. And then they also felt that they could prove that they have the skill when they're talking to recruiters or when they're talking about these jobs. Being able to actually say, hey, I have this Google Cloud badge that shows that I can do something around networking and security in cloud, or I can do something around like, BigQuery or whatever, right? So being able to say that is very important. And in these recruiter conversations as well. So that's basically what we heard from these folks that we surveyed. And if you do take a skill badge, I'll be curious to see what your own experience is. But these are lightweight credentials that can help validate skills that you have. They're not easy, but they are available and they're there. I kind of skip through this, but then we also see that skill badges just give you confidence, and they are like very stackable. So you can do one and do another and do the next, and then kind of work your way up to a certification, because sometimes certifications can feel like a big milestone. And so it also gives you the opportunity to do smaller milestones along the way. So would like recommend y'all check out these skill badges if that's interesting. And there's like some very introductory skill badges that you can start with. And I'll show you some examples of where I recommend you go. But you can start with the introductory skill badges and then kind of work your way up and keep stacking these credentials on top of each other. So that brings me to kind of like a wrap up of that section around cloud learning, right? So just to recap, we spoke about how you learn, why you learn, some of how Google Cloud approaches learning and the variety of options we have. And we spoke about skill badges and certifications as some of the ways that you can validate what you've learned, right? So I'll just pause here and see if there is any other questions on this specific, a bunch of questions. So let's talk through that. But feel free to add other questions before we move on to the next topic. And we're doing really good on time, so happy to answer a lot more questions. All right, so the first question is, okay, which cloud topics are good? So we'll talk about that. What would you recommend as a path to someone interested in becoming a cloud security architect from being a cybersecurity analyst? Serenity, we'll talk about that also. So I have like an entire section where we'll talk about learning paths. So I'll get to that there as well. Besides the badges and certifications, how do we create projects that demonstrate our knowledge in cloud skills? That's a great question, Margaret. So I think what a lot of individuals do tend to do is Google Cloud does this and other cloud providers do as well. But in addition, so taking a step back, when you think about learning and hands-on learning, we provide access to Google Cloud Console and resources. So you're actually learning in the live environment, right? It's not simulated, you're learning there. But what ends up happening is it is temporary. So the credentials are temporary. So when you do the work, it starts. When you end, that project or whatever work that you do does like get deleted and die off, right? Because these are expensive cloud resources. But for you to be able to create your own projects, most organizations offer, and Google Cloud offers, no cost trials, so you can get access to like credits or trials or other options to actually go and work in the console, create your projects, and do work there, right? So there's like a bunch of options on how you can do this. But there's the temporary credentials and badges, which is what I spoke about. But then there's also options to work in the console, sometimes with very low barriers to how you can enter. Hopefully that answers your question, Margaret. And then we have another question, which is, do you have to have any prior skills to start? That's actually a very, very, very good question. And the short answer is it depends on where you're at, right? So most cloud skills or cloud, you have a prerequisite. And so you'll notice in most of our training, there is a section around prerequisites, right? So things that you should know or have known in order to start that training. The prerequisites can, depending on where you are, can feel easy or can feel daunting. But it depends. So the answer is it depends. And there are prereqs that are required. A lot of those prereqs tend to be, so I actually transitioned to cloud, right? So my career was software engineer, like way back, I don't even know when, did a bunch of business stuff. And then I transitioned to cloud. I actually am cloud certified as well. And it wasn't easy, right? So I actually had to go back and relearn like shell scripting and relearn some of like these command line things, like all of these things that I just hadn't used over the past like 10, 15 years of my career. I had to relearn a lot of things also in order to get to the starting point of where I could develop it from. It's challenging, but very doable. So like I said, I did get certified. I don't use it hands-on. I don't do hands-on work on a daily basis, but there are resources that can help you like along the way, right? So what I would say is like the best thing to do is to start somewhere. And then when you start, like one bite at a time, right? There's this funny joke, which is, what's the best way to eat an elephant? Actually, can you all chat this in? What is the best way to eat an elephant? I'm vegetarian, vegan, so I don't eat elephants. But what is the best way? If you were thinking about eating an elephant, what is the best way to eat one? If anyone has, go to a zoo. Yeah. But the joke is it's one bite at a time, right? So if you think about like the big picture, it can be very daunting, but you just do it one bite at a time, right? Or rather the best way to eat a tree, right? One bite at a time. So that's the same thing. That's the way I would think about any skills, is if you think about the end state, it can feel very daunting, but you just start and you take one bite at a time, right? And then you just keep that momentum going. Awesome. All right. Exactly. Yep. One step at a time. And then the last section that I want to get into, and we'll spend most of our time here before we wrap up, is how do you actually then get started on your learning journey, right? So you have all these resources. You're like convinced right now that, yes, I want to do something with cloud and I want to like learn this, right? How do you actually get started? So I want to cover this section in two ways. So one is I want to talk a little bit about the mindset. And then I know, right, Charlotte, like, yeah, I love elephants. So I grew up with seeing elephants. So anyway, I digress. So I want to talk about this topic in two sections. The first section is exactly like mindset, right? And how do you actually like develop this learning mindset, if you want to call it? And then the second section is very tactical resources, which topics to start with. So we'll talk about both. So for the first piece, let me ask you all a question, okay? And I would love to see a lot of chats about this, if you don't mind. Can you walk on water? Who here can walk on water? So if you can, type yes. If you can't, type no. Not yet, no. Okay, so a lot of no's. Yep, keep going. All right. Okay, so yes, in my imagination, I tried it when I was 8. What shoes am I wearing? Awesome, yeah. So mostly no's. Some had the passion to try it when they were younger. Others are dreaming about it, right? Okay, so let me reframe this question. I pour a bucket of water on the ground. And now let me ask you, can you walk on water? Right? So that's basically the mindset, right? So it's really sometimes, exactly, it's a reframing, right? So sometimes what happens is when we think about skills, we set our own barriers to what that skill is, right? So when I asked y'all the first time, can you walk on water? We were thinking about walking on a pond or a lake or a sea or a beach, right? We set these huge barriers to what walking on water is, right? But if you actually reframe it and the skill, like, so a lot of like the barriers towards skill building is internal, and it's things that we set, and we create like somewhat of a barrier to even getting started, right? So can you say, hey, I walk on water in your resume and throw, I don't know if anyone remembers this Friends. Does anyone watch Friends when like Joey drinks like a gallon of milk, right? So can you say you can walk on water in your resume? Probably not. However, it is that reframing, right? Of what is this actual skill and how much of that skill do you need to know in order to qualify to get to where you want to be? And sometimes we set a bigger barrier than what is reality. I am definitely at fault for doing this, where before I start doing something, I set a huge barrier for how much I should know about that topic or how skilled I should be. And it doesn't always translate to what is actually needed. What is needed is much more tangible and is much more achievable than the barrier I set for myself. So I don't know if this resonates with y'all, but something to think about when you think about that mindset of developing skills, right? You don't have to go from 0 to 100. You can go from 0 to 2, and sometimes that's enough, right? And then you continue to build it as you go along. The other thing around learning mindset that I wanted to quickly talk to you all about is, and I've touched upon this briefly, right? Is that how to, the one step at a time is, and I truly 100% like believe this, is it is completely okay. In fact, it's expected to fail. It is also completely expected that you seek support. Someone had mentioned like how you learn from mentors. It's completely, in fact, it's refreshing when you raise your hand and ask for help and ask for support. There's this, how many of you are software engineers here, right? But there's this really interesting, funny thing I read, which is the greatest coders copy, right? So there's something around how when you're doing something, you very rarely start from scratch, right? You really start from a starting point that's already established, and then you kind of tweak it and you work through it, but you don't usually start from like ground zero, right? Yeah, exactly, Stack Overflow, right? So therefore, there is this thing also around like being able to fail, seeking out resources, and knowing that everybody else is probably like, you're not alone, right? If you're thinking about learning this new thing or trying a new thing, there's probably like 1 million people who are doing this with you, right? So you're really very rarely alone in doing something, and it's okay to fail. It's okay to ask for help. It's okay to seek out resources publicly, mentors and all of that, right? So I think once you have that reframing of how easy or hard it can be, and you have the resources and you have the support you need, actually developing the skills becomes the easy part, right? I'm hoping this makes sense, but would love like some reactions or comments. Okay, so let me read through some of the comments. Oh my God, I love what someone, Vishwanath, wrote about Michelle Obama and the quote from Becoming, right? Which is, it's just forward motion and evolution towards a better self, but there is no real end to the journey, right? The journey is the journey. There isn't like an endpoint specifically to anything, including learning. Thanks, Christine. So beginner in this and career shifting, absolutely. Yeah. All right. Any other thoughts on what you might think about when you think about a learning mindset, right? Is there something else specifically that has that you've experienced or you want to share? Yep, absolutely. Don't be afraid to be wrong. It's like starting over, right? But with learning Python, always ask questions. Absolutely. Don't be afraid to be wrong. Absolutely. Someone had mentioned about how, they were not afraid when they were 8. So I have 2 kids, 4 and 6. And I can see my 6-year-old is already starting to be super nervous and afraid of making mistakes, right? And my 4-year-old is like, doesn't care, will do anything, try whatever, literally walks around thinking he is the best thing that's ever happened. Like he'll walk around, his confidence is something to be inspired. And my 6-year-old, I can already start seeing, right? Like he has these questions and he's afraid to be wrong and he's dealing with all of these things, right? So there's a very, very personal, like self-improvement type of element to learning as well, where, kind of like asking yourself questions around imposter syndrome. How do you not care so much about the result, but care about like enjoying what you're doing, right? So there's a lot of growth that also happens with learning, which I love, right? Because you can't learn something without unlearning things and without also kind of like seeing, right, what as a person, how you want to grow in the process too. Absolutely. Like the reason why you're learning, and trust and enjoy the process. Enjoy the process. Important to check in with yourself and boost yourself when you do things right. Absolutely. Yeah. Even when you get things wrong, I will get this right on the next try. Fail forward is something that I live by. So when I said every opportunity I take the opportunity that I can learn. So like right now, my role is I'm doing learning technology, right? So I'm on a team, I manage, and I'm basically a product manager for technology, right? I have no idea what I'm doing. Like genuinely, sometimes I'm just like, Googling, oh, how do you do a PRD, right? Like I'm learning and I know I might fail, but I'll fail forward, right? I'll fail learning something new, creating something, figuring something out, right? So just having that safety in knowing, and worst case, I'll go get a job at Costco, right? So sometimes like the limit that we set is really, really on ourselves, and failing forward, learning while failing is always a good thing. Awesome. Lots of like really, really good comments in there. Cool. So now I'll kind of shift gears in the last 15 minutes towards something that is more tactical, right? So we have covered why cloud is important. We know some of Google Cloud's like resources towards learning and what we provide. We spoke a little bit about mindset and how to think about taking that step towards learning and building a new skill or upskilling, reskilling, whatever skill you're building, right? So now let's get started, right? So what did you want to do? You want to explore Google Cloud and build skills. So the first thing is there is a platform, so Google Cloud Skills Boost. The URL is here, so if you want to click into it, go for it, cloudskillsboost.google. And in here, you'll see a lot of the learning paths and credentials and other things that I spoke about, right? So I'll just orient you to a couple of things. So up here is like your homepage, and then there's learning paths. So learning paths are a very, very easy way to get started, right? So they curated job role learning. So you have paths around getting started with Google Cloud. There's a path for business decision makers, or for people who don't want the technical like aspects, but want to know more about the business and why Google Cloud, right? So there's like paths around being a cloud digital leader. There are paths for cloud architects, network engineers, and so on and so forth, right? So there's all of these curated paths that can make it easy for you to get started and then learn. So there's the path tab there. There's also a catalog. So this is a catalog of 900 plus like courses and labs and whatnot. So a fun way to, if you feel confident and you want to just go explore the catalog for specific topics, you can dive into the catalog. And then, like I said, right, you have your badges and everything that you can collect on your profile and then share it out to LinkedIn, Twitter, or whatever social media profile. So, so this is basically the platform where a lot of learning happens. And then within that, I'll answer some of the questions that came up. So there is on the path section, right? Like I said, there's a bunch of learning paths, and there's 4 specific ones that I wanted to highlight. The first one is the getting started with Google Cloud. So this is for beginners, just to get into the fundamentals of Google Cloud across this core infrastructure and big data and machine learning, right? So you can pick which one, like infra, machine learning, and data, but it's just to get you started and expose some concepts and things like that. There's also a bunch of skill badges and labs associated with the path, right? So this is a good path to start with. If you are somewhat technically proficient and you're looking to upskill into cloud and Google Cloud, this is a great path to start with. As you go further, you might go from getting started to a cloud engineer. You might want to explore data engineering, right? You can start here and then kind of like pick where you want to explore next, right? But this is a great path to get started. The other path that's also very interesting to get started with is the Cloud Digital Leader. So we actually have a Digital Leader certification as well, right? So it's a learning path, and at the end you can actually like get a certification, which you need to like take an exam for, like a proctored exam, but you have a certification option that you can purchase and do at the end also. But it's a no cost, so the path is available and you can just like go and log in and start the path right now if you want to do. But this is much more around why cloud, right? So what is the business benefit of cloud? What does cloud transformation mean? When we talk about concepts like infrastructure, security, and all of that, right? Like what does that actually mean in the cloud? So a lot of like business context and why cloud, right, is what you'll see in the Cloud Digital Learning path. So for someone who is not wanting to get too technical yet, but wants to talk about business value and benefits and get familiar, this is a great path to get started with as well. Exactly, it's great for sales. It's great for understanding why cloud is important, right? And when people talk about cloud, just like demystifying it and unpacking it. And then there's the data analyst path, which is which is great, right? So for the data analyst path, this is for, I mean, you could be a marketing analyst, financial analyst, like anyone who likes to work with data and wants to get better at working with data and use cloud for to be able to do that. So the data analyst learning path is great. So you will learn like how to use like BigQuery and create like visualizations. I really like this learning path because it also like doesn't teach you only the tools, but it also teaches you how do you think about analyzing data, right? So before you get into the data, how do you think about asking questions? Why do you want to, what question do you want to get answered? And then you get into more practical, how do you actually do it? But it brings it all together really nicely. There's some stuff, for example, around, for those in the US, right? There's all of these games that happen in the US, like March Madness, and there's all of these like basketball games. There's all games that happen. And so you'll also see there's labs and things around those games. So using examples, right? Like how do you predict who's going to win this bracket? How do you predict like what will happen at the end of this game? So there's some predictive stuff, but using real world examples as well to explore. Yeah, and then like I said, right, you go on, there's a cloud engineer learning path. And if you click into Cloud Skills Boost and paths, and if I have time, I'll actually like go through some of the other ones, but there's a bunch of content in there that you can start and explore. Does this answer your questions that are open? So Serenity, you had a question about the cloud security architect. So there is a security engineer, security architect learning path. So I would recommend starting there. And that would be a good path for you to like explore and start with. Yeah. All right. Any other questions before I move on? Awesome. Okay. And then, yeah, and then just the last, like very specific, like CTAs. So I wanted to share, and Grisha, like if we send the participants an email, I'll include these links in the email as well. So don't feel pressure to take it down right now. But cloudskillsboost.google, so that's where you can access learning. There's actually a subscription option, which gives you no cost access for a month. So if you want to get started and don't want to pay for it, you can get access to it at no cost, right, to get started. So that's one option. We also have, I wanted to call this out. So we have a campaign, right, that's coming up. It's called Learn to Earn. So this is that gamified learning experience. So it's going to be a fun gamified experience. So it's going to start in June 2022, so in the next few weeks. So I would bookmark that page and just like keep it ready, right? So in June, there's this campaign that's going to create like this global gamified experience where you get to like do skills, show off skills, get skill badges, and I think even get like some skill badge related swag at the end, right? Based on how the campaign goes. So some like really interesting, tangible ways for you to just get started. So you can explore yourself, or if you want to join others who are learning as well, the Learn to Earn campaign is a good one to bookmark. And then for those who are interested in Google Cloud Careers, I just pinged the career site. And it is interesting. So you'll see there's a whole bunch of roles open with Google Cloud. And for those early in their career, there are talent programs. One specific one is called the Cloud Technical Residency. So you might want to keep your eye out for the Cloud Technical Residency program. So that's a 18-month long rotational development program to get you to train on cloud skills and then place into Google Cloud jobs. But there's also roles that are more immediately available for people who have some experience or maybe have some skills already and looking to transition. So I would explore like the careers up there as well. Awesome. So Mary did a Google Cloud Jam. Awesome. Great. Yeah. Yeah, so we try to make it fun. We're not always perfect, right? So you'll see sometimes you're like, hey, I wish this could be better or that could be better. And so that's, I think, what keeps my job interesting is if everything worked great, I wouldn't have a job. So my job is also to continue to improve how learning and the experience that we can provide for everybody, including you. Awesome. And that is all I had. So we have 7 minutes. So we did good on time. Let me open it up. Sonakshi, do you have any comments? Also being from Google Cloud and being a cloud engineer, do you want to just share a little bit about how your skilling journey was?
I think personally, I related to so many slides out, that you have out here. I do have the Google Cloud Data Engineer certification actually, and the labs that are there that are a part of the cloud builds path, they are super awesome. Like they are pretty spot on and they help you gain the skills that actually help you learn more about the service. And at the same time, it plays an important role when you are actually giving the certification exam, because when I was reading the questions during the certification exam, my mind went back to the hands-on thing that I did there. And I was trying to remember what are the answers or like, how does that play out? So I think it is pretty spot on. My advice would be start with the basic part on skills boost. Like once you have a good command over Google Cloud, then go into a specialty path like data engineer or security or whatever. But I think Nandhini, it was awesome, and I related to so much that you mentioned there.
Amazing. Thanks, Sonakshi. All right. Any other final questions? And hopefully, I mean, all of you took an hour out of, I can only imagine what all of your lives are like. So you took an hour to spend time with us and spend time with me and listening to what I had to share. So hopefully this was valuable and helpful. Feel free to find me on LinkedIn and connect if you want. Happy to chat more. But any other questions? If not, we can wrap up and give you all some time back.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. I think that's pretty much it. I don't see any other questions. So thank you to all the attendees. As Nandhini said, you took 1 hour out of your life to attend this. Hopefully you had a great takeaway from this. And Nandhini, thank you so much for, giving us your time and energy today, walking us through how to actually navigate through your career in Google Cloud. And with that, I think that's pretty much it. Thank you, everyone, and have a great rest of the day or night, wherever you are.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.